I'd like to call this public meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nick McCrae. I'm chair of the TCHC Board's Building Investment Finance and Audit Committee. Welcome to the public session of today's committee meeting. Let me begin with an acknowledgement that the land each of us is on as we hold this virtual meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We also acknowledge that all Treaty people, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. During today's public session, 6 reports are being brought forward for the committee's approval and 2 reports are brought forward for the committee's information. We'll start with our typical declaration of conflict of interest. Would any members of the committee please indicate if they have any conflicts of interest with any of the materials in today's meeting? Seeing none, we'll move to the public agenda items. And just to reiterate a little bit of a change in process, as well as I'd like to suggest a order change in the agenda. We'd like to welcome all of our guests, of which we have many. This might be a record, at least the last year or two, in terms of numbers, so welcome all. We'll move 9A, the Amoresco report, I think as the first item so that we can release them afterwards. Then we'll move into the Auditor General's report and Ernst & Young's report. In both cases, there'll be some opening statements and discussion, and then we'll go into in-camera to discuss individually the confidential elements of those 2 presentations. So that's a little bit out of the ordinary, but I'm sure we can handle it. Yep.
So they're in progress.
Oh.
We can start with the AG.
Okay. So the Amoresco folks, I guess, are still in transit, so we'll stick to the regular agenda, and when they arrive, might bump them up. But with that flexibility, can I ask for a motion to approve the public agenda items? Thank you, Director Campbell. Can I have a second? Thank you, Naram. All in favor? Carried. We'll move to item 4, confirmation of the public meeting minutes from the May meeting. Can I have someone motion for approval? Thank you, John. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Item 5, business arising from the public meeting minutes and actions update. Any questions or comments on that? I'm just going to I think I have a question on number 5. Hold on 1 second. Oh, no, sorry, that was in the in-camera. Can I have a motion to approve the meeting, the business arising? Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. And we'll go to item 6, Auditor General's report on cybersecurity assessment. I believe there is an initial. Oh wait, do we have a deputant on this?
No, we don't have a deputant. We understood that there was an initial public comment from the Auditor General in relation to this matter, and then the intention was to go in camera. Is that not the case?
Good morning. Hi, I'm Tara Anderson, the Auditor General for the City of Toronto. So yes, we've done a cybersecurity audit on Toronto Community Housing Corporation, and it also covered Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation, and we have a presentation that will be provided in camera. And thank you very much to management and to my team. So to Louisa Andrews, Linda Barrett, to Ali Shahidi and Deepanshu, and as well as to my team, Syed Ali, Gawa Mark, and Cecilia Jing. Thank you.
So I think a motion to go in camera in relation to receive advice from the Auditor General in relation to matters touching on the security of TCHC's property is in order.
Can I ask someone to move that? Thank you. All in favor? Carried. We'll move to in-camera for the receipt of this report.
So again, for staff or others who are not directly involved in relation to the Auditor General's report, if they can excuse us for the purpose of an in-camera portion of the meeting, and then we'll invite you back in when we're concluded that session.
Yeah.
We're also trying to put as much into public as we can now, so.
Yeah. Even just like the starting bit, it's logical, makes sense, but it's still awkward, right?
There's not going to be any more questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Where's Dara? Thank you. We're now back in public session. I'd like to thank the Auditor General for their comprehensive report on cybersecurity for the organization. We will move a motion to receive, but ahead of that, any public questions from committee members? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the report and presentation. Thank you, John. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Again, thank you very much to the Auditor General and team. Appreciate all the helpful advice and recommendations. We are now going to move to item 9A, which is the 2023 Facilities Condition Index Report. And there's a presentation from Amoresco. Ahead of that, I believe we have a deputant on the item.
Yes.
So we'd like to welcome that deputant.
I will be speaking on item 9B as well, combined. You want me to do it now or after 9B?
I assume we'll do them in order. We're doing 9A right now, so if you want to make your comments on 9A.
Let's do this. Let's go back to region 5. But I love and appreciate it. Well, here we are again. Happy Wednesday. Wednesday, right? Happy Hump Day. My deputation is called Building Assessment Condition and Reserve Studies. Before I do that, I have a little disclaimer where I'm going to say that I am an indigenous person living at 220 Oak Street, and my landlord is TCHC. That goes for the lawyers. So I'm speaking item 9A and item 9B. My background and knowledge of math is very simple. 2 + 2 = 4. And I had to ask my girlfriend, who is a property manager of a co-op, to help me understand all these graphics and numbers and tables. It's number change and gaming change and blah, blah, blah. So I made an FOI last month, with the goal of understanding the current state of our building construction at 220 Oak since it's been imposed since the late 2022. I have been told that unless Amoresco, who is here to make a presentation, agrees to allow this citizen to have access to the building assessment condition of 220 Oak Street is a question mark yet to resolve. I understand in my FOI that I made to you guys is that for 220 Oak Street, there is no reserve fund studies. Well, that is interesting. Background. In 2018, TCHC consulted residents of 220 Oak Street so the capital investment what I needed to revitalize the building envelope. With the help of Noah Slater, who is working with the City Housing Secretariat, and the support of the RPAT Accessibility Committee, we engaged with conversation with different stakeholders, residents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Part of the conversation that we have was to promote job opportunities for the residents to be involved in the tower renewal of 220 Oak Street. In 2019, the board approved almost $30 million for an energy retrofit capital investment program with an emphasis in accessibility for our units and common areas. In 2022, we were provided with a plan, and it's carried on Region Part TV. Oh, by the way, I submitted my deputation to Sonia, so in case you want to see the video, it was carried on Region Part TV in 2020. The capital project at the time numbers were calculated on pre-pandemic times. In 2021, TCHC attended to start construction beginning with the hub service model at 220 Oak, the long ground improvements, and the dog park. In addition to 11 e-bike lockers and in a mural that was the last project done at 220 Oak. Now the question is, in post-pandemic times, with high inflation costs, labor, et cetera, I don't think the list of priorities that you guys calculated in 2018 will be reality in 2024. I don't think there is no money. And on the report, it's on 9B, it says that you guys are going to be short of $160 million after 2027, because right now you're using the National Housing Investment Fund to give you money for capital projects. So I understand that you're trying to, your FCI go down to 10% in 2027, but right now you are bordering 13.30%, which is negative It has implications in the life of residents. In this case, 220 Oak Street project is still standing by. And my major concern is the opportunity to have jobs for members of my community, like myself, who has mental illnesses. And today is 124 days that my trike, my e-bike, and my e-trike are locked at 220 Oak. And I had to come here on TTC. Thank you. That concludes my deputation for today. Any questions? You know where to find me. I'm here sometimes next door.
Thank you for the deputation. We'll now move to the presentation.
Thank you, Chair, and through the Chair, I can just introduce our two members that we have from Amoresco. So Amoresco is our third-party consultant that we've worked with on our capital plan. They've been working with TCHC since 2008, and I'm pleased to welcome Tim Detlef, who's Senior VP and General Manager, and Graham Maxwell, who's a Senior Director. And we just thought, given all the conversations that we've had regarding FCI and our capital plan, that it would be a good opportunity for the BIFAC committee to hear from Amoresco themselves. So with that, I will turn it over to Amoresco, and I'm just going to put their presentation on the screen. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning to the BIFAC Council. We're honored to be here today. So my name is Graham Maxwell. I'm the Senior Director within Amoresco's Asset Sustainability Group. And I'm joined by my colleague, Tim Detlef, who spearheads our business. Tim?
Yeah, so Tim Detlef, Senior Vice President of Amoresco, been with the company for a long time, working with Toronto Community Housing for a while as well, so we're privileged to have that opportunity. Maybe a little bit of background on why we perhaps are sitting here and a little bit of background on Amoresco. We have been in the business of doing FCI analytics and capital planning, total cost of ownership for at least 30 years now. We have a privilege, I guess, of working with about 580 clients that are similar to TCHC. Well, some are not similar. TCHC is a very large organization, but we have quite a database of information, which I guess allows us to be able to look at the opportunities and compare how TCHC does to the rest of the industry, but also other industries, certainly across Canada, but also in the US. So it gives us an opportunity to leverage some of the 3.2 billion square feet of building assets that we have currently inside our data set. And I think that gives us a lot of insights to see how TCHC is performing. And we'll talk about that performance as we get going here.
Thanks, Tim. So today we're providing a short presentation, which should take no longer than 10 to 12 minutes. With the Council's permission, we'd like to present all of our prepared slides before opening up to questions. If that's agreeable, we'll get started. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, in terms of opening remarks, TCHC we've been working with for a while now, and we believe that TCHC has a strong understanding of the portfolio condition and the capital needs. Processes have been in place since 2017 to validate conditions through BCAs and update actions using a system called Asset Planner. Recently, in the 2024 Asset Management Plan, published by the City of Toronto, the TCHC data set or data maturity was described as high. There are other public entities named in that document that have low or medium maturity. So again, that's credit to the processes that are in place here. Capital funding within TCHC, at least since 2017, has followed industry standards of 2% of current replacement value. That is something that a lot of industry bodies out there recommend to maintain the quality of resident life for your portfolio. And lastly, as evidenced by the year-end FCIs, which continue to perform better than the forecasted values back to 2017, TCHC has generally been prioritizing planned work over demand spend, and that's something that we'll get into in this presentation. Next slide, please, Alan. So just to kind of summarize 2023, TCHC invested around $370 million of capital renewal into its portfolio. The FCI at the end of 2023 was 13.5%, and that exceeds the forecast of 14.5% set out in the original 2017 plan. The year-end actuals have generally exceeded expectations since the program began, and that's evidenced on this chart on the left, where the blue line represents the forecasted values, the red line denotes the actuals. The trend has been continuously better than forecasted since the beginning of the program. However, the trend won't be possible to maintain without a continued investment. Without investment, the capital renewal needs are projected to increase by $3.74 billion over the next 10 years. Next slide, please, Sam. So, again, using a graph to kind of tell the story here, since 2017, we've been tracking backlog capital spend versus total capital spend, or planned capital versus everything else. If you follow the dark green cells, from 2017 to 2020, TCHC has successfully allocated 80% or more to planned capital. Since 2021, however, there has been increasing levels of demand capital allocations. Cumulatively, this has brought the overall program allocation below 80% for the first time in 2022, and that's a trend that continued this year. Now, there are several potential reasons for this trend, and we can all discuss the impact of inflation, but not without first acknowledging the impact of TCHC's capital renewal threshold, which is what we hope to discuss in the next slide. Feel free to chime in here, Tim. But okay, so capital renewal threshold, many organizations establish these to these minimum capital thresholds to avoid the cost of capitalizing immaterial items or demand spending. In our experience, the TCHC threshold of $1,500 is lower than industry markers that are shown on this slide. For example, CMHC has a capital renewal threshold of $5,000. Ottawa Housing has a threshold of $10,000, and these have been in place for over 20 years. BC Housing recently raised their threshold from $5K to $10K in the last 2 to 3 years. In summary, a low capital renewal threshold can negatively impact FCI as spend is disproportionately allocated to low impact activities. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so I think you're all familiar with FCI and how it works, but the concept here, of course, is it's a measure of risk. And in order to ensure the quality of resident life is where it needs to be, the industry has leaned on a 10% marker for that. And what's interesting with TCHC prior to 2017, the backlog was rather challenging because it was the backlog of needs put the entire portfolio in the poor range. And that's, the great investments that have gone on are certainly offsetting that and combating that and addressing that. And I will say that TCHC is going in a very positive direction and should be proud of the work that has been done.
Getting back into the data, so the table on this slide compares the TCHC FCI to other housing clients that we're fortunate enough to host within our software system. It demonstrates that TCHC is on par with other Canadian housing providers, despite buildings being 11 years older on average. While the FCI is currently higher, due to both age and historically low funding, the 5-year and 10-year unfunded projections show that TCHC is in line with industry. This is generally a positive indicator that the 10-year program has been effective and is trending in the right direction. Lastly, we wanted to expand the comparison and the benchmarks to other entities in the Greater Toronto Area. And this also further emphasizes the strong progress that TCHC continues to make in a challenging financial environment. The asset management plan produced by the City of Toronto, it generally benchmarked different portfolio types between 10 to 30% FCI on average which is similar to TCHC, and the University of Toronto currently have an FCI of 18.8%. Comparing to all sectors within Asset Planner and the many clients that Tim alluded to, once again, TCHC's 13.5% performs admirably in both the current year and the unfunded future year projections. Next slide. In summary, TCHC continues to make progress by lowering its portfolio FCI and enhancing the quality of resident life. Recent years have seen a trend towards non-backlog capital allocations, otherwise referred to as demand, and a continued focus on planned capital is going to be required to maximize the impact on FCI in the coming years. TCHC could consider adjusting policy to increase the capital renewal threshold from 1.5K to 5 or 10K. This would align with industry, and it would enhance the impact of capital on FCI. Lastly, continuing to ensure that the BCA program is funded and remains a priority is essential to ensure that capital needs are validated and continue to be aligned with TCHC's goals and objectives.
I think as we look across the portfolio and the progress that has been made, I think TCHC is sitting in a very good position relative to the rest of the industry. But it's not always about relative to the industry. It's about how is it impacting quality of resident life for the residents, tenants inside the portfolio. And I think this is definitely trending in a very good direction, even compared to other organizations. I think this is important because if you look at higher education, you look at other markets, vertical markets, for us, TCHC is ahead of those markets, trending ahead of those markets. But I think there's some policies that need to be looked at with respect to capital investment and just how the dollars are invested. But I think the team at TCHC is doing a really good job prioritizing dollars, and I think that's important to know. And I think that what we see as kind of a third party is that you are trending in a very positive direction, and you should be proud of that.
Thank you very much for the presentation. This is obviously a key area of focus for the organization and this committee specifically. So something we've been spending increased amount of time recently in an effort to continue to improve the quality of our buildings and obviously the resident experience. So appreciate that perspective. I've got a few questions, but I'll defer to my committee colleagues first. Questions for the presentation. John, go ahead.
Thank you. So how is the FCI calculated?
So it's a very simple calculation. It's just the number of dollars of need today for a particular building or all the buildings in the portfolio divided by the current replacement value of those assets.
Okay.
So if you bought a brand new house as an example, the FCI would be 0, meaning that I have no needs to fix. It's a brand new house. Every piece of equipment from furnace to roofing to sidewalks are in excellent condition, obviously, brand new,
right?
Divided by its replacement value.
And does your company also gather data from private sector, companies that are owners of apartment buildings and townhouses?
We do as well.
And how does this compare to private sector?
So private sector tends to, generally speaking, tend to spend more money on capital renewal to stay ahead of it.
Right.
But in the public sector, we don't see that.
Right. So private sector tend to be more in the 5%, 4% range. Is that what you're saying?
No, they can be upwards of 10%, and it just depends. But it depends on location. It depends on geography.
So is when you say that if the FCI target is between 6 and 10%, the general overall facility condition is fair, right? But this is an industry standard that when you go from 10% to 11%, it's considered poor.
Yeah, and
it's a big jump. It's a big leap, right?
There has to be a line drawn somewhere. So 10% was kind of where the industry has leaned to that. But it's a low poor,
Okay,
but it is definitely in the poor range.
right. Because, some buildings can be old and yet not necessarily in poor condition and not necessarily in need of a lot of capital expenditure. Is that not the case?
That's absolutely true, and just because a building is old doesn't mean it's decrepit or has problems. Aging infrastructure, you can't stop it, and it continues, and it will have an impact for sure, but old building isn't necessarily a bad building.
When you take when you look at the replacement cost of a building that's 60 years old, so how does that work? Well, that would be an unfavorable, that would tend to be on the unfavorable side, would it? Because you've got a building that's already, fully amortized, I guess, or, and to replace it, you're replacing it with, the replacement cost is to 2024 standards, right?
You are looking at kind of a like-for-like replacement.
Okay.
And the CRV, so numerator and denominator are both in current day dollars.
Oh, okay.
So everything gets adjusted all the time.
Okay, all right, that's all. Oh, and then the question for, I guess, for us is the $1,500 threshold on capitalizing costs. Is that something, is staff giving consideration to coming forward with a change in that for board approval?
I'll start. So through the chair, we are looking at that. It's been raised a number of times in the past as well. The most significant issue associated with that is it doesn't create more funding for us, right? So it changes the threshold of what you capitalize and what you don't capitalize. When those demand repairs are still required and when we still execute them, what it essentially does is shift that funding from our capital source to our operating source. So if we were to do that, that's a multi-million-dollar hit to our operating budget. We've been having some conversations with our funders to look at what the implications of that would be, but we're very much subject to sort of budget decision-making as to whether or not we could make that change. I don't know if, Lily, if you wanted to add anything else.
Through the chair, thanks, Sean. In terms of the annualized impact, Director Campbell, if we were to change or increase the threshold from 1,500 to 5,000, we're looking at around $30 to $40 million on an annualized basis, potential shift from capital funding source to the operating funding pressures.
And this is an ongoing discussion and a topic. Like it's really a question, how do we manage this? Because, spending capital on items that are $1,600 are not improving the facility condition. They are touching ups or cosmetic or what have you, and it's not entirely appropriate that they be counted in the capital budget. I think hand in hand with that, there has to be a solution on how do we fund those if not out of the capital budget. In a perfect world, we'd increase the operating budget by the same amount, so the work is still being done, but it's properly categorized as operating repairs and maintenance as opposed to capital spend. And that's what's depleting the percentage of the capital spend that's improving the FCI as opposed to not improving it.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
But I expect more discussion on this and ultimately a decision in the near term on this specific item. Other questions from committee members? We got a couple here. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
So if in fact we did move that 1,500 to 5,000, what would our FCI be?
It effectively, I can answer that in short order. It basically effectively moved 30 to 40 million from non-FCI impacting to FCI impacting, and you'd have to run the calculation on how much that depleted, but it'd be meaningful. Like it basically, if the spend is 350 million, it's going to improve it by 10 to 12%.
So that would move us up to the
Well, compounded it by a couple of years, right? A 10 to 12% improvement to the FCI over 2 or 3 years will have a meaningful difference. And that's if we moved to $5,000. We moved it for 7,500 or 10,000, somewhat arbitrary numbers, but that would obviously increase it significantly.
So my second question is how, because they use the Ottawa as one of the comparators, and obviously they're funded in a very similar way, I assume. How are they able to do it versus us?
I'm not sure if you've got a comment on that. It's, if you don't know, that's a fair comment in terms of how their funding works, operating versus capital, I assume.
mean, they have essentially the same funding sources.
Well, yes and no, right? Like the different cities, different provinces, different, depending on how they're.
Well, size also, and maybe the age of their buildings is different too.
Yeah, lots of factors at play.
Is there anything we can learn from what Ottawa's done, I guess is my question. Does Amoresco have any comment on that?
Is there anything you can learn? The answer is, I think we can all learn from our peers and see what they're doing, see what's working, what's not working. So I think that's one of the things one should consider is looking at a change in those thresholds so that you can, in fact, ensure yourselves that you will hit the 10% FCI by the end of the term.
Because basically $8,500 is a significant difference between what we're using, what they're using.
Significant.
It is.
Parthy, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. When I was at the school board, on the school board, FCI was often discussion as school boards are funded by the province, of course. And it was very common to see schools during my 8 years between 30 to 50% FCI, which of course isn't great. But the question I have is, during those 8 years, we didn't have anything that I would describe as critical or crisis with the schools, and even some schools are above 50%. And given that it's an industry standard, is it fair to call that 30 to 50 critical? And I'm just, not saying to advance that we should allow, work to not be done, but I'm trying to, are we being too cautious or too risk averse? A tough question perhaps, but given that experience, how do we reconcile them?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, schools are not housing residents full-time, and it's a different environment, and I think that the thresholds for FCI should be held to a higher and tighter standard when it comes to quality of resident life. I'm not saying that schools should be underfunded at all. We do a lot of work with a lot of schools, and I think they'd be upset if I said that they shouldn't receive as much funding. But at the end of the day, schools can still operate at a higher FCI, but the quality of teaching and learning is a little bit more challenged in those environments when the FCI is higher. It's harder to teach and harder to learn in those environments. So they get to pick different systems that they want to rectify, fix, replace. So anything that affects temperature, sensory perceptions, sensory things like that, those things get fixed first. Whereas in residence environments, the interiors matter too. It's important that it's safe, it's comfortable, and it's a nice place to live. So it has to be a different standard.
I just
understood. Yeah, fair enough. An obvious contrast. As part of your review, was there any ability to contrast the quality of facility improvement by a contractor, by a service provider?
Alan, do you have a good answer for that from the BCA program side of things, or from in terms of any kind of analysis?
Maybe, so that question probably more for facilities management than Amoresco. Is that a fair comment?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So through the BCA process, we do building condition assessments on a 3 to 5 year cycle, depending on the building. At this point in time, there isn't anything that has been identified as being critical in terms of, like what we saw at Swansea or previously at Fir Grove. I do want to caution, though, with Swansea, that was very unusual and not necessarily something that would have been, it would not have been something that would have been captured through a BCA, just because of the type of condition that it was, which went back to the original construction of the building. But we do monitor through the BCAs. They're one input we have. We do also have input from building staff, from facilities management staff, and others who are in the buildings and go to visit the buildings. We do also have those inputs as well. So there's a number of inputs that come in. It's not just solely one item.
Go ahead, Sean.
Okay.
Sorry, if I could just make a comment to add on. So through the chair, I just wanted to make sure that the committee understands too, just because we don't have any outstanding critical issues that we're dealing with doesn't mean that they don't occur, right? So we do have critical responses that we have within our buildings. And I think the point to make is that as we continue to operate with a portfolio where a number of our buildings are in poor condition, there's an increased likelihood that we're going to see these critical failures happen. Right, so I'm copied regularly on reports of issues around a boiler failure and hundreds of residents not having access to hot water, for example, or an elevator failure and people can't access the upper floors of the building, or leaking and water penetration into units, right? So while we might not have a lot of these things outstanding today to point to say, well, because the condition is X, we have all of these situations. Because the condition is X, it's more likely we're going to experience more of these situations, and they do happen regularly. So I don't want to leave the committee with the impression that they aren't happening, because they very much are, and we're responding to them.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Brian, I see your hand up. I'm not sure if that's a remnant from your earlier questions or a new question.
I just wanted to ask in relationship, I mean, Swansea was unusual, but there have been unusuals. I forget the actual building, but I was, I think, on maybe Finch out in Scarborough, where a whole wall of bricks fell off. I mean, where we got these, we inherited construction we had no control over. Is there any way that we can sort of identify, those kinds of, very significant challenges and very dangerous ones? I don't know whether we can look at those, but I don't know whether, Alan, you were around when, that was probably about 5 or 6 or maybe even greater years ago when that happened out in Scarborough, and where, again, it was faulty construction, as what I heard. But
Alan, is it fair to say that the building condition assessment process involves people going to the site and doing a visual inspection as well as reviewing sort of all the building systems from an age perspective? So, that's sort of the best way of assessing whether there's any potential failures or what have you at this time.
Yeah, through the chair, correct. And Director Smith, I think I know the building that you're talking about. Chair McRae is absolutely correct. Like, buildings are designed and constructed generally that visually is really generally where you see the first glimmer that there may be a problem. So now, again, things can happen, but the BCAs that are done, along with reports that we receive just through work orders, through site staff, bringing things forward, through the meetings that we have with site staff on a regular basis, in terms of planning the capital, when those things are brought together, that really provides us with our sort of first line of defense to understand potential problems that may exist in a building. Sean's absolutely correct, though, that there are always going to be things that will happen, and we are generally prepared to react to those when they happen. Unfortunately, in a portfolio our size, we've seen many different things that have happened over the years. So on a good note, that gives us a good basis in terms of how we can react when these things may and will occur in the future. But it is definitely, the visual is your best first line of defense, and then we use that along with all of the other information that we have. When we do see something that happens in a building, if we know that there is a building of similar construction, perhaps there's a sister building to that building where an incident occurred, we do absolutely look as best we can to see if we believe that that incident could happen at another building, and certainly have inspections done and things like that.
So our best knowledge is really having good staff and of course tenants identifying these things before they become serious risks.
Any other questions? My only remaining question, just on your opening remarks, you made a couple comments about, the team has a strong understanding of portfolio condition needs, demonstrating strong or sound capital planning principles, which are all appreciated and good feedback for us as a committee. The last comment on prioritizing plan work over demand spend, is Ameresco sort of involved in that, or what's the basis of that comment? Because my assumption would be the opposite, that when there's demand spending, it wouldn't be negated or neglected in favor of planned spending. It'd be the other way around.
Yeah, maybe it's not written correctly, but I think the point we were trying to make is the trend since the beginning of the program has been mostly 80-20. The last 2 years have absolutely dipped below 80-20, and that has decelerated the impact on FCI, and a renewed focus on the planned capital should be a must to kind of ensure you really drive that FCI reduction.
Appreciate that clarification, and certainly that's a key focus for this committee because of that, both the proportion of spending capital to demand to planned, as well as the FCI and the target dates and so on. So appreciate that. With that, I see Adele's joined. Adele, did you have a question?
No, I think, Nick, you kind of covered my concerns, because it was like the standalone, those statements look like everything is fine. And I wasn't sure how involved Ameresco was in our budgeting and our actual spends, because right now, like in 2023, we spent over half of our $350 million on demand. And so those statements on their face sort of conflict with, reports that we've gotten from internal audit as it relates to our, prioritization and our processes. And so I wasn't sure how involved Ameresco got, what, sort of the scope of their review work. Because I think it's really important for the board to get balanced reporting so we can understand the context. I think just that on their face, it makes it seem like everything is going well, when we know we've identified a number of areas that need improvement in state of good repair. It's not to negate the good work that's being done for planned. I didn't want it to appear that things are fine, and so I think it's important that Ameresco provides the context, and we understand the work and the processes that they reviewed to make these statements. I apologize because I came late, so I don't know. I came at the end where we were talking about the increasing in the thresholds. I know that that's something that keeps coming up, but I hope that we're not missing the point that we need that funding in operating. Like, we can't just increase the threshold for capital. Those expenses aren't going to go away. And, we have to work closely with the city to increase that funding for operating to ensure that we can cover those expenses. So I don't know if that came up. You know, when you say that that's an opportunity for us so that we can still achieve our 10% FCI, it's not that easy.
No, thanks, Adele. And yeah, that discussion did happen, and the complexity of the funding associated with that was discussed. With that, any further questions? No hands up on the board. Can I ask for a motion to receive the presentation? Thank you, John. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. Thank you very much. We appreciate the presentation and discussion today. Thank you very much. Okay. We're going to go to item 7, as we have guests and a presentation who have been patiently waiting. So with that, I'll ask Ernst & Young to come forward, and I believe Lily will make some introductory remarks. Similar to cybersecurity, we will, I think, have a brief discussion in the public session and then move to in-camera to discuss various implications and so on. Is that a fair statement? Okay.
Yes.
Great. With that, welcome, and maybe Lily, over to you to start us off.
Thank you, Chair Marie. Presented today in front of you for your consideration is a TCHC's Procurement Transformation Plan prepared by E&Y. This work is guided by the EY Financial Sustainability Plan work done last year to really modernize the procurement practices and optimize the potential procurement savings. It's also being prepared with extensive consultations with our board and committee members, with our executive team, with TCHC staff, and external third-party suppliers and the vendors community.
One tonight, one tomorrow.
The key deliverable of this work is to really conduct a procurement maturity assessment based on the gap analysis from the current state to the desirable future state, a value for money procurement transformation plan, as well as leading up to an implementation roadmap. Please be advised, this is also intended to serve as a strategic guide to TCHC's procurement transformation journey over the next few years. I do want to take this opportunity to thank the EY team, led by Mohammed, Bamani, Sid, Sharma, Pavan Papu, and also Tess Rutherford, as well as TCHC's strategic procurement team led by Hanan Barakat, and the operational leads and the procurement leads across all our divisions. With that, I would like to turn over to the UI team to walk us through the recommendation as well as the presentation.
Mr. Chair, I think Brian Smith's microphone is on. Oh, it's muted? Okay. Why do we need to go on camera?
start?
Yeah.
Right. All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Sid Sharma, and I'm a partner at Ernst & Young. I lead the Procurement Transformation Solution offering for EY in Canada. I'm joined by my colleagues Tess Rutherford, Pawan Pappu, and Mo Bamani from EY. Before we start, I'd like to just thank the TCHC management and their teams for the time and support throughout this project, in particular Lily and Hanan and their teams who guided us through the review process. If you can go to the agenda slide in the deck, please. So the next slide. So the agenda for today is as follows. We'll give a quick overview of the project approach itself, the timelines. I don't know if it's your microphone or somebody's microphone is echoing. We'll go through the project overview, the approach, the timelines, and the stakeholder interactions that we went through as we conducted this review. We'll then go through the summary of findings, which has 3 components to it. Sorry, if you can go back to the previous slide for the agenda. We'll go to the summary of findings, which has 3 components to it. One is maturity assessment and gap analysis, opportunity identification and prioritization, and then what we heard from market sounding. Then we'll follow it up with what does the future look like in terms of procurement for TCHC, following up with a summary of recommendations, again, 3 components to it. And then we'll present the case for change in terms of what does the procurement transformation look like for TCHC and why is it important and critical to embark upon this journey. So if you go to the next slide, in terms of the project overview, EY was engaged by TCHC in March of this year to develop a procurement transformation plan that enables the function to realize stability, sustainability, and growth. The review itself had 2 areas of focus. One, to conduct a current state review, develop a future state vision, and develop recommendations aligned with leading practices. The second part was focused on 2 aspects. So one was conducting an analysis of the procurement spend, looking at the historic data, and applying external benchmarks to assess potential opportunities for cost efficiencies. The other part was to identify opportunities for enhancing vendor participation in TCHC procurement. The work was undertaken in 12 weeks between March and early June and involved interactions with over 25 internal stakeholders and reviewing over 100 documents. What we'll do now is go into the findings, and to do that, I'll hand it over to my colleague Tess, who will now walk us through the findings from the current state assessment. So if you can go to the next slide, please, for the current state findings.
Okay, so like Sid said, for the current state assessment, through documentation review and discussions with many members from TCHC, we assessed the current state maturity to be at a foundational to developing level. And the assessment was conducted across people and organization, process, governance, and technology dimensions. We also held future state visioning sessions, and we understand that TCHC is looking to move towards more of an advanced maturity in the future state. I'll provide a couple examples of the opportunities. So, for example, there's an opportunity to have a little bit more formalization in terms of processes and roles, definition around exactly when divisions and when procurement get involved in certain activities. There's an opportunity to enhance some of the policies and streamline approval processes, as well as to make sure that the systems in place are supporting all aspects of the procurement process to enable data visibility. That's just a couple of examples of the areas where we saw gaps and there is opportunity to improve. We can keep going along to the next slide. So what does this mean for TCHC? So based on the current state assessment, if the gaps aren't addressed, this could lead to potential increase in risk from a financial, operational, compliance perspective, particularly in regards to the limitations when it comes to contract management and the P2P process and systems. Right now, they're also, this can also lead for reduced value for many outcomes. So the current organizational structure and sourcing processes aren't using a category-led approach to procurement, which may mean there's some value left on the table. There could be potential for delays and inefficiency. We did hear a lot about the lengthy VAC and change order approval process and how this can lead to operational delays if things aren't able to be approved in a timely manner. And finally, we heard a lot about limited vendor participation, so concerns with lack of vendor participation in RFXs and how to engage new and emerging vendors in the sourcing process. All right, we can keep going. So that talks a little bit about the maturity assessment and why addressing some of the gaps are important. Like Sid mentioned, in addition to the maturity assessment, we also conducted a spend analysis. So Pavan's going to walk us through a little bit of the current state findings from that.
So as part of our current state assessment, this is the quantitative portion of this. So we did a spend analysis to understand where the TCHC is spending their procurement spend on. So we on the left side is the approach that we used. It was a three-step approach where we first did conducted a spend analysis to understand.
Sorry, can you speak a little closer to the mic?
Yeah. So our first step was to understand what was the total spend that TCHC was spending. It was $455 million over 1,800 with over 1,800 vendors. Then we looked at the different opportunities that were part of it. So the opportunities were primarily based on understanding the different levers that can be used to get better value for the spend. So typical examples of that could be, I think the screen is gone, but the typical examples of that could be volume consolidation and having negotiated RFPs or group purchasing. So we identify 6 different levers that TCHC can use. I want to pause.
So for members of the committee who are online and may not realize, we've lost the projector in the room that is projecting the presentation onto screens in the room for those who are here. At the same time, the AV staff have left us because the mayor is conducting a press conference this morning, so they've had to go and support that. We've asked them to come back and address the problem. I'm in the committee. We're in the committee's hands as to whether we want to proceed.
Sorry, is the screen still available to people virtually? So people virtually can still see the presentation. John, do you have a presentation? I have it as well. Let's continue. Thank you. And maybe note when you change slides. Thank you.
Okay. Through this process, we've identified some opportunities, value creation opportunities, which would help TCHC gain about 4 to 8% in savings, potential savings through execution of these opportunities. Again, this is at this state, the big disclaimer we have is this is an estimate based on different benchmarks. This data needs to be further validated. We'll need to have more discussions with the stakeholders within TCHC on this one. Again, and this is a point-in-time analysis from the historical data that we have seen. So with that, I would like to move to the next slide here.
All right, so I'm moving on to what we heard from market sounding, which is the next slide. So following maturity assessment and data analysis that Pavan talked about, the third aspect of our review was what we call a market sounding. Through market sounding, we talked to vendors through 2 different approaches. We conducted deep dive interviews with select vendors from key divisions, primarily facilities management, and we also sent a survey out in which there were 80+ respondents spanning various divisions. And the key challenges and opportunities that we heard in talking to vendors were around a few areas. One is the RFX process itself. So the level of detail provided in the RFX and the SOW is not always sufficient for vendors to accurately price their work and then also carry on to deliver the work in alignment with what the SOW requested. Along those same lines, requirements didn't always align to what TCHC wanted down the line. And so by far the most vendor comments that we received were related to that. So the RFX documents, process, SOW definition. The next item that many vendors mentioned were concerns with the invoicing process, making them potentially hesitant to bid on work with TCHC, delays in invoicing and payment, and inconsistency in invoicing approach. Another item was just the two-way feedback that's available to vendors to share their concerns and to collaborate closely with TCHC for any feedback as they go throughout the contracting and then further engagement process. Vendors also raised a few opportunities that may help with increasing vendor participation that we wanted to highlight. So they explained that potentially more training and education on the bidding process would be beneficial, perhaps feedback mechanisms to gather vendor feedback and collaboration between the vendors and TCHC. In summary, all of this kind of comes down to the process type recommendations. As we move into the recommendations, you'll see that by improving some of the processes like the sourcing process, the invoicing process, and in these recommendations, a lot of these will even just be addressed by that. So just want to keep that in mind as we move into the recommendations. So I think, yeah, perfect. So now we'll move on to the what does the future look like slide. This is the one we just finished talking about. So what does the future look like? We won't spend too much time on this one, but the idea here is that an ideal procurement function would have all of these capabilities in place and they would be supported by the enablers. So the right people, the right processes, the right governance, the right technology. And so when we talk about what does the future look like for TCHC, we think of a more streamlined, centralized, standardized procurement process. Okay, you can move to the next slide. So we have quite a few recommendations coming out of this report. These are this is the summary of the recommendations in this exec summary deck. Recommendations have been grouped into 5 work streams, and the purpose of that is this is how recommendations will be implemented. So there's a strategy and governance, people and operating model, process, technology, and value creation. And those are groupings of opportunities that will be sequenced for execution in the implementation roadmap. We'll go through every single one of these, but I'll just touch on a couple. So a few of our key recommendations are for example, streamlining the award approval process to make sure that that's an efficient process that divisions are able and procurement's able to get through quickly to prevent operational delays, some enhancements to the procurement policy, which I know that procurement SPO has already been working on. We are recommending more of a center-led operating model with a center of excellence that will be responsible for maintaining training, continuous improvement, process, policy, and governance. We also are recommending that processes are further built out at a more granular level, including key decision points and where each stakeholder gets involved. Finally, on the technology front, there is some technology in place that's being used within procurement, but we see an opportunity once processes are redesigned to see if there's additional functionality that can be enabled within existing tools like Garrity, as well as opportunities to perhaps introduce new tools to make the user experience and integration among process steps like sourcing through to contracting through to P2P a little bit more seamless. The final work stream is focused on value creation, which is what Pavan talked about. So these are some specific sourcing and value creation opportunities that can be potentially executed in the short, medium, and long term to create better value. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so along with this project, we've also developed a set of procurement performance metrics. The purpose of this is that there should be metrics in place that procurement uses to measure trends and change over time. So as you go through this implementation and this transition, how are things trending? What benefits are you realizing? What's the sourcing cycle time? Things like this, so you can see how it'll change. And then we also suggest that a few of these, we provided a few suggestions with the green stars, are reported to an executive level, BIFAC and board. And so at the senior leadership and board level, key stakeholders can get an understanding and get confidence in what procurement's doing and the changes that are happening over time. Okay, next slide.
Thanks, Tess. So what we see is a strong case for change here in terms of enhancing the maturity of the procurement function at TCHC. And that leads to sort of these four things that you're seeing on your slide. So one is mitigating the operational, financial, and compliance risks that might exist in the current procurement process. It gives the ability for the procurement function to drive increased value for money outcomes. It significantly drives operational efficiencies through the procurement process and helps free up staff time for critical initiatives. And lastly, but importantly, it helps increase vendor participation in the market by implementing some of the recommendations that we gathered from this work. While doing all of this, there's also an opportunity to realize some cost efficiencies in the range of 4 to 8%. Like my colleague Pavan said earlier, this data has to be further validated through discussions with different stakeholders within the business to further validate the sequencing and implementation constraints within these opportunities. Having said that, it creates a strong case for making this initiative self-funded by realizing some of the cost efficiency opportunities. Lastly, if we go to the next slide, what does TCHC need in terms of critical success factors to go through this transformation? So the first one is leadership buy-in at all levels to support this plan, to support the implementation of this plan with the board, BIFAC, and the executive leadership team support. The second part is training and upskilling of the SPU staff and divisional stakeholders who are involved in the procurement process. So once the new processes are designed, there might be some training and upskilling required for that. This transformation requires a lot of change in the organization, and so change management is a critical aspect of the transformation plan as well, and effective communication is key to that. And lastly, some upfront investment might be required in terms of engaging resources, capacity, and capability to implement the findings and the recommendations. And so that is a critical success factor as well. With that, we end our presentation and open it up for any questions.
Let's, so as the committee members know, there was a confidential reading attachment included with more specifics, et cetera. Let's start off with any public forum questions as it relates to the presentation given. And if there's follow-on questions that relates to the confidential reading, we can go into an in-camera session, but I'd like to keep as much of the discussion and questions in the public forum as possible. So I just ask committee members as it relates to maybe either personnel related, specific financial questions, et cetera, let me know and we'll ensure we go into in-camera, but if they can be addressed in the public session, that's our preference as always. John.
Thank you for the presentation. What does strategic sourcing look like to you?
So strategic sourcing usually requires sort of two parts of the analysis. So one is to understand your existing spend patterns, your existing contractual situation with, key categories of spend. And then sort of looking at the external market as well and developing a sourcing strategy before you start sort of drafting the RFP or RFQ and go out to the market for supply selection. So there's a lot of advanced planning and analysis needed in a strategic sourcing process typically. That happens before you go out to the market for supply selection.
So you mentioned that there's not a lot of give and take or dialogue between, in the procurement process with vendors. Does strategic sourcing, does that mean you might approach potential vendors to broaden the pool?
Absolutely, through the chair. In cases where you know that there is limited, supply base for certain goods or services, or you know that there is need for maybe more information about the market, then you would go down the path of interacting with the vendors to get examples of, what can be done to open up the market a little bit more for vendor participation. You might also want to do that to include any innovative measures from the suppliers into how you deliver services and how you procure goods. So that interaction sometimes is necessary as part of the strategic sourcing process.
Thank you. And you suggest that reducing the procurement cycle time would lead to efficiencies, but is not the procurement cycle time sort of a function? Well, it sounds great. Instead of having a procurement that lasts for 4 months, it would be great to have it for 2 months. Mm-hmm. But you either need more people or you need more information in order to reduce it. So by what means would you reduce the procurement cycle time?
Through the chair, some of the things that can be done to reduce the cycle time are by designing, first of all, the process that is clear to everyone. The roles and responsibilities are clear. People are accountable for providing the right information at the right time for procurement functions to go out to the market, using the system in the right way as well to have visibility into where is the process in a given point of time, and also advanced planning. So rather than reactively going out to the market for selecting suppliers, is there a way to plan in advance for the upcoming procurements so that you have the required time before you start the process? That would reduce your cycle time.
And so in your review, do you see that not happening?
We are seeing that happening in pockets, but not consistently across all procurements. And I think that is one of the findings as well. It's not to suggest that nothing is happening with respect to procurement. That's not the recommendation or observations that we're making. We're saying that there are pockets of best practices that can be taken up together with leading practices from outside to provide consistent processes across the organization.
And then this last question, but for now anyway, in your view, can these changes take place? You mentioned there might be an investment required, which probably means more people, but can these changes be made with the current staffing complement that we have, or do you think that needs to be augmented?
Go ahead, Lily.
Let's take that in-camera question.
That's a public question.
Well, in terms of staffing levels and
Well, he's either going to
roles,
say we need more people, or you can probably do it with the people you have.
or the answer could be different from that.
All right, okay. I'll withdraw the question.
Fairly.
I think it's a public question. We're a public body, it's a public question. Okay.
So we'll definitely, with that, we know we're going to go into in camera, but ahead of that.
I don't need to ask that question in camera.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's go to committee members on virtually. Parthy, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question in the vein of John's question regarding the recommendation around a center of excellence. I think to the public, it looks like more bureaucracy, which may not necessarily translate in the public side to more efficiency or better outcomes. can the presenter speak to why this procurement model would be in the public interest, and why, or tangibly, how does the Center of Excellence create that efficacy? And are there models that you can point to?
Yeah, through the chair, I think if I understood the question correctly, I think the question is around the need for a center of excellence and how does it add value in the future state. So in our experience, having been through multiple procurement transformation journeys with public sector clients in Ontario and with City of Toronto and City of Calgary as well, a center of excellence team helps provide the right kind of support in terms of processes, maintaining processes, providing data analytics, and enabling continuous improvement within the procurement function to achieve value for money, to create efficiencies within the procurement process. So it's a support team within the procurement function that helps drive those value for money outcomes. Because from our observation, not just for TCHC, but with other clients as well, with other public sector entities as well, we see that there's limitation in those capability areas with existing staff, and therefore you need people with those skill sets to have those data-based inputs that drive sourcing strategies, that drive category management to enhance value for money. I don't know, Tess, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I guess
it,
in the current state,
broadly,
it's difficult for, if team members are, say, dedicated to sourcing or to buying, to have time to be spending on like continuous improvement type activities. So a center of excellence is a dedicated group that, say, would develop training, lead training, update processes, update the policy, provide data to the rest of the groups to make better sourcing decisions to get more value for money. So just having a dedicated group that's focused to those continuous improvement type activities. Yeah.
And so what I take away from that is a major factor currently is a bandwidth issue, that staff are unable to provide that value, that improvements because of bandwidth, and hence we need more FTEs. Is that the thrust of the argument?
I think it's a function of, yes, the necessary bandwidth to do some of these things, and part of it could be capability as well. The access to market intelligence, access to the data that is required to provide those kind of inputs does not exist. So some of this can be capability related as well as capacity.
Okay, fair enough. And as a corollary to that, is it best placed that the Center of Excellence is outsourced?
Through the chair, that was not contemplated in the review. Our point of view, based on our experiences, that that Center of Excellence team is better suited to be in-house with the talent supporting the procurement staff and day-to-day operations, as well as the divisional stakeholder teams. So things such as contract management or supplier relationship management. If you want to have the right processes, this team would support those discussions. And it's, in our experience, again, it's leading practice to have those capabilities in-house, working hand in hand with the procurement staff.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Any other questions? Maybe I'll take a poll of committee members for in-camera questions. Obviously, if we don't have to go to in-camera, that's preferred, but obviously if there's specific follow-on questions, we can go to in-camera to deal with those. Are there any in-camera related questions on this topic? Okay, seeing none, With that, I'd like to thank Ernst & Young and the management team for the presentation and discussion. This is obviously a big priority, and I think you highlighted it right off the bat with almost $500 million of spending. Can we do that? We need to do that better and continue to improve, and this could make a material difference. So appreciate the work, and probably the first step on a long journey, but in the right direction. Can I?
Chair, sorry to interrupt. I was just wondering if our staff are speaking to be or talking to the presentation.
Lily, do you have any comments you want to make at this time?
Sure. I had my opening remarks. It's an important work. And then it's also a multi-year transformation journey. Councilor Canterville, if I may sort of, Sid also referenced in his presentation that the city of Toronto has gone through a very similar transformation journey. It was multi-year, started with the city staff doing the internal assessment, and we took out to the market, engaging EY to do the citywide assessment, specifically for strict sourcing and also category management. I was fairly bit of new to this game, but I can share with you last year, during the 2024 budget balancing strategy across the city, one of the balancing strategy was to really leverage the recurring procurement savings, whether through the cost savings, cost avoidance, or efficiency gain offset that contribute to the overall city budget balancing strategy. And then even through this year, through the budget chief, Councilor Carroll's budget direction to the city divisions, and one of the key things she highlighted is about procurement improvement. I think on that lens, TCHC definitely this is on track, and we are looking forward to the committee and the board approval to move this process forward, and then to report back with the progress and also a financial impact that's going to come out of this process.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lily. I appreciate those comments. When do you expect us to get an update on, this report's great, good recommendations, and here's a timeline of implementation and update to the board?
That's going to be next scheduled BIFAC meeting. It's going to be in September. We're going to come back with the management assessment and also recommendation of the prioritization, as well as the sequencing of the implementation roadmap.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
I'm just checking if this is for approval. Can I ask for a motion to approve? Thank you, Parthy. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, Ernst & Young. Much appreciated. I believe I neglected to do the consent agenda for the public session. So in the absence of that, I think we'll just work through the hodgepodge of what's left of the agenda, given we've bounced around a little bit. So that was item 7. Next up on my list is 8A, the financial reconciliation of the demand general repairs program. And I'll hand it over to you to management to start us off there.
Thank you, Chair McCray. So the report in front of BIFAC today discloses the details of the material overspend against the approved spending authority for the Demand General Repair, or DGR program, in the 2022 to 2023 contract year. Our goal today is to provide details related to the overspend and the deficiencies that led to it. TCHC management takes full responsibility for the circumstances that led to the material overspend and is committed to making the necessary changes to ensure the deficiency is rectified this year to prevent further recurrence. The report also outlines the specific measures we are implementing to strengthen our internal controls and practices. I have our Senior Director, John Ankow, here with me today, and he will provide additional details on what led to this issue and what steps we are taking to ensure this matter does not reoccur this year and moving forward. John?
So as mentioned, the report that we brought forward to BIFAC outlines the overspend against the approved spending authority for the DGR program in the amount of $34.8 million, and which resulted in non-compliance with the TCHC financial control bylaw. As background, the DGR program involves the delivery of demand general repair work. It represents a high volume of work that's assigned to vendors, including bathroom and kitchen renovations, flooring, and painting work. The overspend that's outlined in the report represents DGR work that was committed to vendors in the previous contract year between September 1st, 2022 to August 31st, 2023. This overspend was identified during a recent reconciliation of program expenditures, which initially led us to believe that the overspend was attributed to the current contract year. However, upon further review, the overspend was confirmed and attributed to the previous contract year. The circumstance that led to the overspend was due to a deficiency related to staff error and oversight, as well as limited internal controls and practices. This resulted in inaccurate tracking and reconciliation of program expenditures. And while DGR program reports were regularly generated to inform reconciliation of expenditures, staff accountable for conducting the reconciliation generated these reports using incorrect parameters, resulting in the significant underreporting of expenditures against the approved spending authority. Due to this error and oversight, DGR program reports captured only work orders completed and paid within a given contract year. They did not include the total volume of work orders committed to work vendors during the contract year to reflect a more accurate accounting of program expenditures. Since the discovery of this deficiency, we've taken steps to standardize and automate the reporting parameters and reconciling the DGR program expenditures to the appropriate GL codes. We acknowledge that this material overspend is a serious matter, and we are committed to taking the appropriate changes, which include strengthening accountability over this activity with the appointment of new staff to reconcile program expenditures, also reviewing the accountability system and structure that is accountable for this work. We're also utilizing HOMES to develop a new standardized and automated report to ensure consistent and reliable reporting. We're also adopting cross-divisional monthly reviews to monitor variances, including updating monthly accruals. And lastly, we're conducting a review of all vendor contracts to ensure that there are clear provisions and enforcement of work order completion and invoice submissions. And with that, Mr. Chair and committee members, we're here today to answer any questions you may have on this matter.
Questions from the committee members?
I'll give a step. So thank you for the report and for the acknowledgement of the mistake and the pledge to make change. I guess what I wonder is, this is a mature organization. It's been it's not like we just started up a couple of years ago. So presumably this has happened in the past, I suppose. But how is that? How is it that this has occurred? I mean, what was this the mistake of, one individual or one, office, or that missed it? And this has, and I understand and I can appreciate that it's complex when you've got contracts that are multi-year, payments are going out. It's not like you do an RFP and you cut a check and somebody gets paid, right? Like, money's going out all the time, right? And it goes out, it doesn't go out and finish up on December 31st. It spills over to the next year. So I get that it's complicated, but given that this is a mature organization that's been around for many years, how is this, why are we seeing this now and why was this not resolved, I suppose, 4, 5, 6 years ago, something like this?
Can I start? So through the chair, just one more piece of context that I'd like to add. An important driver to this is this recent surge in demand repair spending.
Okay.
Right? So this is something we've talked about as we've talked about the state of good repair budget and how that portions of our capital budget have essentially been diverted to do more of this demand repair. So this is very much related to that. Because of that significant surge, you've heard in the past about the budget reallocations that had to be done in order to meet the requirements of that additional demand spending. This is another piece that's largely driving where we are now, but around the contractual authority to perform that spend not the budget authority. So I just wanted to point out, yes, the organization has been around for a long time. There's a long history of doing this sort of work, but there has been in the last couple of years a significant change in the amount of spending in this particular category. And I'll ask maybe Nadia and John if you want to add more to it.
So through the chair, another significant contributing factor is a lack of documented, consistent processes around how we're running these reports. So we've had staff turnover, we've had change in technology, but I think what we were lacking and what we're starting to establish is clear standard operating procedures for how we actually run the reports. So each contract is different, each program is different, so we need to ensure that we are aligning the reporting and the tracking related to the contractual expectations and obligations, and so that's what we're starting to do. So we had a new staff team that took over this work last year, and they were running the reports based on what they were told in the onboarding. We were working with IT to establish automated reporting, but what we realized was we didn't have the appropriate parameters established and documented so we could run them consistently. So that's what we're working on.
Okay, so
If I may also add, Director Campbell, there's also, we do have process in place, but in terms of completeness of that process, for example, when we do reconciliations or reporting, what we've discovered part of the gaps or deficiency, if you may call, when we reconcile the actual spend back to against the contract authority vendor commitment, also reconcile back to our approved budget, as well as our GL balances. Now, in this new process we have established for the DGR ongoing reporting, we want to make sure all the checks and balances are in place to reconcile across all the sources of reporting and also all types of transactions in the system as well.
okay, I'll let somebody else ask a question. It's not straightforward.
Other committee members?
I don't see any other committee members.
I see a few names. Naram, did you have something to add, or just signaling you're still with us?
Correct. I'm signaling that I'm still with you. Okay, thanks.
Well, I'll chime in. From my perspective, obviously, first and foremost, it's a significant amount of money. We're not talking about $1 or $2 million, talking about 30+ million, which is not insignificant. And so that's noted. I do appreciate management's, coming forward, acknowledging it, and also some changes to be made because of that, as opposed to, it was a one-time thing or won't happen again. There are changes to the process, the system, resources going forward to address this so it doesn't happen again. And it's unfortunate that it had to be such a big number to be realized, but I appreciate the thoroughness and then the go-forward plan to ensure it doesn't happen again. Go ahead, John.
Just a follow-up question. So if somebody has to approve a payment, and they say, okay, the invoice comes in and the payment gets approved and the money goes out the door, is that payment not always measured against a budget? So if you've got the painting budget, the hall, or the common areas budget, I mean, there's hundreds of buckets and the invoice is put against a certain bucket. When the payment goes out, is it not cross-checked with the budget?
Through the chair, yes, it is. But for the specific reconciliation, we're also reconciled back to the contract authority, which is the vendor commitment.
Okay. So in this case, the payment was made because it was within the boundaries of the contract, but it wasn't really within the budget.
It was in the budget. It's actually the other way around.
So you want to explain that to me?
For example, if a demand work order, say it's $1,500. So in that line, under the demand general repair, under the operating budget, we budget $1,500. So from the budget perspective, it is within the budget is approved. The payment went out of the door. But in terms of the contractual obligation, is because it's multi-year, multi-vendor. Even though the team were running monthly reporting, we did not necessarily capture all the work orders in the pipeline.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you.
And through the chair, I'd like to add the overspend, much of which we've discussed at length, was in the capital program. So the reason why I want to point that out is the discussion around where we were with moving some planned capital to accommodate the DGR capital is where this money is captured.
Any other questions from committee members?
Just
Brian, go ahead.
Is it possible to have this done on a quarterly basis? Do we have the IT in place so that we can get this, so it's not end of year kind of information to compare, budget to actual?
Through the chair, Director Smith, is going to be it's going to be done monthly. We're comparing the spend not only against the budget, and will also be against the contract authority, and also reconcile back to the GL balance as well. That's our go forward plan.
But in terms of report to the committee, I mean, obviously we don't need it, I don't think monthly, but certainly quarterly, it would be just nice to know that our actual and our budget are aligned, so that, on our regular meetings, at least we would get a simplified report just saying we're on track. I mean, management, obviously you'd want it on a monthly basis. That's just a question of,
Definitely we can definitely we can commit to report back to the committee and board on a quarterly basis, which is our existing reporting schedule. We will add this element into our package.
Okay,
so just to build on that through the chair, we do report on the reconciliations related to the budget. Historically, we haven't reported on the reconciliation related to the contractual approvals, because in theory, we should be coming proactively to ask for a change order. But we can take it offline and explore with Dara and Lily in terms of how we incorporate that into future reports.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion to receive for information? Thank you, John. And to be forwarded to the board. All in favor? Carried, thank you. 8B, change order on integrated pest management services. Any questions from committee members?
Just one. So I just, the question that I had is, why is this coming right at the very end of the year? Why wasn't this picked up sooner?
Through the chair, this change order, the excess spend was picked up just during the Q2 reconciliation.
Okay.
So we just want to be proactive and bring forth the required change order before, as you mentioned, the end of the contract year, which is August 31st.
Okay. Okay. So here.
Can I have a motion to approve? Thank you. All in favor? Carried. 8C, contractor award for integrated pest management services, RFP 24029. Any questions from committee members? Go ahead, John.
How is it to our benefit that we would put in, so we've got a contract of 2 years, and how is it to our benefit to have 2 one-year extensions?
So through the chair, what informed the structure of the contract was 2 things. The initial 2-year of the contract was meant to provide stability for the program. So having the vendors get familiarity with their respective portfolios and the staff they work with. And the back half of the contract with it, which is the extension for 2 possible 1 years, gives us the flexibility to amend the requirements of the contract. And typically we see in this industry, in the pest management industry, there are constant advancements being made in treatment, materials, and delivery. So we wanted to build that in and give us flexibility should we needed to amend our service model to adapt to the needs in what we're seeing in the field.
So, I mean, you're saying the industry is changing so much that we want to have the opportunity to, lock in their service?
So through the chair, apart from evolving technologies, we want to have the flexibility to look at our service delivery model, potentially after 2 years. And so this provides us the opportunity to revisit how we deliver services and if we need to put it back out to market.
And so we've factored in a 4% price increase in those second 2 years, or that the latter part of the contract. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Why would we choose 4%?
So I believe that was done based on the result of an environmental scan the team conducted on what was the average percentage being applied through the service lines in the industry.
That seems high to me because times are changing.
Yeah.
So it's like, so are we locked into that price then for the final 2 years?
That's correct.
Which is at the 4% increase?
At our option though, right? That's our option if we choose to extend the contract.
So, yeah. So how does it work then? It's either at 4% and we're locked in,
Or we retender the market.
So we.
Absolutely. If we identify through environmental scans that the price is more competitive, we could retender and issue a new RFP.
Okay, all right. That's fine, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Parthy, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. In line, same vein as the previous questions from Ernst & Young, in establishing this roster of 6 vendors, is staff able to do a value for money assessment on performance by having a diverse vendor list?
So through the chair, the staff that we have on hand, the environmental health technicians, do perform quality assurance inspections. So these are randomized audits that they pick throughout the portfolio, and they work with site staff to access the units. If it's in-suite work, they also do audits of common area work and in common areas, but as well as the external bait stations. So through this work, we would identify work that has been identified as ineffective or inappropriately placed, which would then trigger the warranty process related to these services. So not exactly term value for money, but we're able to maximize the reach of our dollar when we are looking at the demand and plan services through the program.
Okay. And in terms of what they charge us, is it comparable or do we see variation in price points?
So through the chair, there is a standard price list that's been established as part of this process when we went out to market.
Is that set by us?
So through the chair, as part of the bidding process, the vendors would have been asked to price rank each of the service lines that we intend to deliver. We then take an average of these scores, which would then determine the final price list for the program.
Right, and thank you. And is staff's intention to do a performance audit or ranking of these vendors at the end of the year, end of 2 years? Is that part of the best practices?
So through the chair, I would say there's multiple ways that we assess performance. Performance management is an ongoing conversation between us and vendors. So there is a set of meetings that occur between vendors and the TCHC management, which provides an open forum dialogue in terms of the requirements for the contract. But there's also a more formal evaluation that's done using a standardized scorecard, which gets into the details of specific metrics that they need to address and achieve through the balance of the contract. And these are ongoing evaluations that does not need to wait until the balance of the 2 years. They're often done monthly or quarterly throughout the duration of the contract.
Thank you. And lastly, is there I'm not sure who could answer this, is there an overarching document template that guides performance review regardless of procurement, whether it's pest control, IT, whatever it is there any overarching performance standards or document template review that we use?
Through the chair, yes, Director, we do have a performance evaluation framework On staff within the Strategic Procurement Division, we also have a vendor compliance office as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Hanan, our Senior Director of Procurement, just to give you a high-level overview of that framework.
Through the chair, sorry, to confirm or clarify the question, do you mind just repeating it for me one more time so that I can address the exact?
Is there an overarching guide, framework, template that guides performance review of whatever procurement that we engage in, whether it's pest control, IT, facility improvement, whatever it is?
Performance for vendors or performance in general on the RFP process? To clarify.
No, not the RFP, on their performance. So Helix Pest Control.
Okay.
There was reference by your colleague about performance reviews are conducted.
Yep. Yeah, so yes, there is
From
a vendor.
governance perspective,
Yep.
is there a template or a standard or a guideline cross procurement that staff uses to assess value for money, assess performance?
Yes, so to assess performance specifically, the answer is yes, we do have a framework, and that framework is a combination of different staff members collaborating together from both business and the SPU side, where a vendor, after they perform the work, they're being scored, and there's a specific scorecard with key questions. They are metrics for that specific business division that get inserted or placed into a specific software. And from there, we keep track of the performance and any concerns with regards to contract breaches with a particular vendor. Those types of details get reported back to the business unit through procurement, should there be a consistent failure in complying to contract obligations. But it is a collaboration between the business and our strategic procurement division.
Okay, so what I understood is that there's industry-specific performance review. Is there an overarching guideline that TCHC uses to guide performance reviews in general, or is it all unique and custom to the service?
We do have a vendor compliance protocol, but typically within each division, we try to tailor some of the questions to meet that particular industry's requirements so that it's specific to the industry and not just a very high level questionnaire, if that makes sense. So if it's pest control, and John, feel free to jump in, but it would be specific to pest control.
If I may add, we do have some overarching performance guidelines or framework, but as EY team, part of their presentation, there are some improvement activities were yet to happen to bring us to better standards. And I do want to share with you, for example, on our FM division, we also follow the city's evaluation framework as well as categories. For example, we assess the contractor performance evaluation, professional services performance evaluation in the categories of like we are using the city's scorecard to track and monitor, for example, health and safety compliance, quality of deliverables, work plan in completeness, and also work performance in terms of executing the work, as well as administration of the project schedule along those lines. And those metrics are being collected on a regular basis and being tracked into a vendor performance database Vendorful and report back to the business divisions. And then we also share that with the vendors. In terms of closing the loop, when we go out for evaluate the new vendors coming on board with new contract, one of the key criteria in our vendor work documents is to report out the past performance. For example, it could be 2.5 out of 5. The vendors will have to pass their performance score in order to be awarded the new contracts with TCHC.
Okay, that's clearer. Thank you, appreciate it. And last question, very quickly, are these templates, guides, reviews, have they been modified for better assessment and better internal controls in the last few years, or are we using models that have been around for a while?
That's the work in the process to be done. Some of models are, especially the city models, are being in place for a while. We're also in a regular discussion with the city. Some of them do require refresh, upgrade, and also modernization.
That's good to hear. And is there a timeline on when those models will be refreshed, reviewed and refreshed and updated to the board?
That's going to be the ongoing work, definitely by the end of this year, and then going into 2025 as well. That's part of entire vendor lifecycle management, including vendor performance evaluation and tracking, and use that data to more effectively guide the work we do in terms of procurement. We will be reporting back to the committee on a regular basis. I would say probably on a quarterly basis, part of our overall procurement metrics report back.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Any other questions on this item? Motion to approve. Thank you, John. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. 9A we've dealt with. 9B. I personally had one question there. I'm just going to pull it up. 9B. Apologies. Just give me a second. In the reallocation of funds from, I know RC12, life safety, for $1.8 million. Can you just speak to that, in that makes me nervous, removing capital from life safety?
Through the chair, I understand what your concern is. I can assure you that we're not foregoing something that is critical to be done. When we do the budget envelopes, like right now we're doing them for 2025, of course, within that envelope, we always build in a contingency. So we have, a number of projects. We also then build in we try to build in a contingency into that budget envelope. As we get through the year, we do see if we have remaining contingency or unallocated funds in that particular envelope. This is one that was identified that we do, and we are not forecasting that we will need them for the end of the year. However, we constantly, like weekly, we review the capital plan, and I can assure you, should something come up, we will absolutely deal with it. Just because we have reallocated funds from that envelope doesn't mean that, if a number of things happened and all of a sudden our year-end forecast became higher, then we would absolutely look and reallocate funds back if we needed to.
And this is obviously at a planned capital.
Correct.
As was a demand. So it's either a specific project identified or, to your point, contingency that you're allocating out of that category.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. It's a question I'll ask every time I see that.
Absolutely.
So feel free to include that in the report next time, or I'll ask for sure. Any other questions on this item from committee members?
Chair, I'd like to add a comment before we close this item. So on page 52, on the demand spending, I wanted to acknowledge that there's an unfavorable variance on the local move-outs. We will be bringing a more detailed explanation and variance report to the board for discussion at that point. So right now, the delta is about 2.6 million, and so the staff will be bringing to the July board meeting an update in terms of what is contributing to that and addressing any outstanding concerns there.
And sorry, that was page
52, under the demand section, the local move-out program.
It's on page 75.
Apologies, I think I have a different deck.
Second, yeah, $2.6 million variance. Okay. Appreciated. Any other questions from committee members? Okay, a motion to approve. Thank you, Parthy. All in favor? Carried. We will move to item 10. Any questions from committee members on item 10? No? I'll ask for a motion to approve and forward to the board for approval. Thank you, Naram. All in favor? Carried. With that, I think that's the last item. Any other business for the public session? Seeing some gentle shaking of heads, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, John. All in favor? Carried. And we will move back to in-camera session.